So it turns out China has quite a bit of a problem with video game piracy, but it's a specific kind of video game piracy. It is export-only piracy. Now, I have never heard that term, but looking into it, it actually makes a lot of sense why people who are video game pirates would do this. Now, obviously, as always, for the record, I am against video game piracy. Don't do it. This is, of course, just for informational purposes only. So, I got this from Gizmodo. They say digital pirates in China are getting more sophisticated and are blocking their services domestically to avoid local law enforcement, and US copyright holders would like to speak to the manager. So they say the International Intellectual Property Alliance, and that's a mouthful, so the IIPA, this represents various US entertainment industries from Hollywood to gaming. The IIPA is calling on China to do more to stop these operations, which have been dubbed export-only piracy. Now, Torrent Freak also added to this. They say a few days ago, several of these threats were highlighted by the IIPA, which counts copyright groups including the MPA, RIAA, and ESA among its members. Now, the IIPA shared its concerns with the U.S. Trade Representative as part of the annual review of China's World Trade Organization obligations. So, this might sound a little odd, but basically there is something called the World Trade Organization. Essentially, this was established in 1995. This is a gigantic trade organization. Like, this literally consists of the majority of the world's countries. There are 166 member countries of this organization, and for reference, there are 195 countries in the world right now. So yeah, pretty much the entire world is part of this. So the IIPA, which is mainly ran by, it looks like, US organizations, they do an annual sort of review on specifically China's compliance with the World Trade Organization guidelines. So I've linked this in the description, but here it is. This came out September 23rd, so about a week and a half ago. So there are specifically parts that do talk about this export-only piracy problem in China. So right here, for example, it says, unfortunately, market access restrictions remain the primary driver behind persistent, evolving, and rampant piracy in China. It says, while significant piracy in China's domestic market remains an enduring challenge, the exporting of piracy content, piracy services, and piracy devices from China to foreign markets is a growing and equally troubling global trend. And it basically goes on to say this is obviously creating quite a bit of a problem in countries that are not China. And yeah, as we read a bit earlier, it's kind of a sophisticated way around this whole thing. They are kind of ironically not providing services in China, but literally providing services what seems to be everywhere else. And this is all to avoid law enforcement. Obviously, China law enforcement is probably going to be a bit less concerned about enforcing the law when this sort of exporting problem really doesn't affect them. And that's, by the way, not saying anything specifically about China. That would probably apply to really any other country. If you are not reaping the problems of this issue, you're probably not going to care that much about it. Now, they also go on to say that another tactic these pirates in China use is that they actually reskin games and then just kind of put them out there and they try to basically make it their own thing. I think this has been a problem for a few decades now. I think like SNES, like ROMs of old games from foreign markets, like you can see that a lot of those can sometimes be these sort of reskins of, like, say for example, an old Sonic game or a Mario game. But not only is this continuing to be a problem, it even seems to be a growing problem. This is the way that these pirates are evolving, or at least it's another way. It says, due to the Chinese government's enhanced enforcement actions to combat piracy, including against pirated video games, recent years have seen a shift in piracy tactics. So instead of traditional methods that involve technical cracking of game software for complete duplication and distribution, game piracy in China is increasingly characterized by reskinning the original games with non-substantial revisions. It talks about how they can go about doing this, and that this essentially is posing a greater challenge in establishing infringement compared to traditional piracy. Basically, it's actually a little bit harder, or quite a bit harder, to prove that these pirates are infringing on copyright when they are kind of putting like their own spin on things. Yeah, it's not just a copy and paste, they kind of do their own thing. And it says legislation and judicial practices in China currently cannot respond to this evolution in commercial scale piracy, and the copyright protection protections and remedies needed to stem this form of illicit game modification are unavailable. It's kind of your classic case of legislation and government policies just simply are not caught up with what the current trend is. So I don't know what needs to be done to fight this unique piracy problem, this export-only piracy problem coming from China, but yes, it does seem to be evolving quite fast, and for a lot of IP holders that are overseas and just simply not in China, this can be quite a bit scary.